Nate from Nerdarchy here, for nerds by nerds, and I have my esteemed colleagues,
Dave.
and
Ryan.
and we're here to talk about Dark Sun, the terrible hot sands of Athas.
That's right. It's pretty warm there.
Terrible, huh?
Oh yeah,
I hear it's a nice place to visit.
No, it's not, because you can't get out.
it's very hard to get out.
What the hell? What is it, Ravenloft?
Well, part of their cosmology is they are closed off to all of the planes, especially the divine ones. Basically, the only people that can hear your prayers is if you're a divine caster, are the elements, like earth, fire, air, water. And the sorcerer kings are just like, yeah, you're going to be my bureaucratic servants and you're going to do my bidding. But yeah.
I thought you were going to say something else, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to keep it PG.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
But alliteration's good.
yeah, there's that too.
So, Dark Sun, Dark Sun is, it's one of those, it was really one of those worlds that set itself apart from everything else that was going on with Dungeons and Dragons and TSR back in the day.
There's Forgotten Realms, which not really my thing, and then there's Dark Sun. Forgotten Realms is every sort of high fantasy game you've ever played, and then there's Dark Sun.
Well, you at that time you had Dark Sun, you had Forgotten Realms, you had Greyhawk, you had Dragonlance, and they were kind of all like the same but a different flever.
Different focus.
But then they added Dark Sun to the mix, and that was the difference of like fruits and vegetables.
Well, I mean, that was around the time that they were experimenting with a lot of expansion of campaign settings in that same time frame. You had Ravenloft, you coming around, you had Planescape, you had Dark Sun, there was Red Steel, Mysteria, which I think is actually another segment of Forgotten Realms, actually. In the late 80s, early 90s, they launched a ton.
Oh, you're talking about Mystica,
yeah. That's it. They launched a ton of
campaign
settings. Not all of them really stuck and had like a solid fan base.
There was a couple of them that were really interesting. Ravenloft, Dark Sun, and Spelljammer are the three that actually always stuck out in my mind.
Planescape.
Planescape.
Well, and Spelljammer is debatable because some people just laugh at the setting when you bring it up too. It's one of those ones that's super hit or miss.
Well, here's the thing with something like that. It was, when I say it was different enough to stand out, whether you hate it or love it, it still stood out.
Right.
Now, Dark Sun, of all of them, is definitely the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Post-apocalyptic. Harsh, you're gonna die.
Forgotten Realms looks like a fantasy utopia compared to Dark Sun.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and there's people that don't love Dark Sun for the fact that I can't have my character with this ridiculous armor and these +5 weapons, and no, your baseline weapons have penalties to hit because they're made of cruddy materials because it's what you could scavenge and lash together. And
it is by far one of the harshest campaign settings that TSR ever came up with.
Yeah.
There's only two other ones that I can think of that are comparable, and one of them isn't actually a Dungeons and Dragons game. So,
well, I mean, what other campaign setting for this era had you make several characters, because most likely 1 to 2 of them were going to die.
They introduced the character tree.
Right.
Make 3 characters. Oh, and by the way, start them at 3rd level because. Fuck you if you think your first level character can leave the city.
Yeah, nobody leaves the city who's below 3rd level because it's just too dangerous. And
you're talking about a world where the plants are psionic and try and eat you.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's got a really cool history to it, in the fact that basically, it's a almost completely desert planet. The idea is that magic has totally destroyed the world. Basically,
it's a planet. It's a planet on its way out.
Right. It's a dying planet, and people. Basically, the bad guys won. They've carved up the remains of the planet. They lord over it, and it's kind of your characters are just making their way through the world.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because it's a huge thing, and some of you guys may not know about Dark Sun. Maybe some of you guys are fans of Dark Sun. I don't know, but Dark Sun is Dark Sun because magic destroyed the world. It's like nuclear fallout with magic. And when arcane casters use spells in Dark Sun, they take that energy and they call it from life energy, in that's found in plants and animals.
Right.
You know,
and they create ash where nothing can grow for decades after.
If they don't carefully draw the magic out slowly and take it from a wide swath of land, it defiles the land.
Right. Which, to varying degrees, some editions have done better than others as far as capturing the sort of like, because there's boons, boons to doing it, and that's why people would do it, versus what's called preserver magic, where you just take just as much as you need. Like in second edition, Defilers and Preservers did separate XP tracks. Well, all the classes did back in the day. But
Defiler was super sweet. Yeah, you went up fast.
You advanced as quickly as the rogue or the thief did back in the day, because the thief had like the quickest progression. So the Defiler was a spellcaster that advanced really quickly, because he just cared about power. He didn't care about how he did it.
So let me get this straight. That means everybody wanted to be the Defiler, right?
Except for everybody wants to murder you dead. So there's that.
Why would they want to murder you dead? You advance so quickly. It's so cool.
Yeah, while destroying the world. So
that part.
Yeah. So
everybody's kind of figured that out by now.
Yeah, most people
bad juju.
In the world, so basically arcane casters are generally scorned, across the whole of the world. Maybe some of the more shady / evil, like raiding tribes, could be okay with a Defiler among their midst, but by and large, like everybody, the commoner in Athas is wants to stone a wizard to death, because they just know that they bring misery.
If you were okay with defiling, you were definitely a shitbag.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and your character, if not blatantly evil, has evil tendency, and through defiling will ultimately end up following an evil path. Like that's it's really. Because you're aware
it's a straight path to power,
right
in the world.
So the stakes of what you're doing, and if you regularly engage in that activity, then.
But that being said, there are a couple people that do defile, and they kind of get the pass on it.
Well, but they did it in limited doses, right? It was kind of the thing.
No. The Sorcerer Kings, they're the ones that defile, and it's not so much that they get the passes; they squish anyone that argues with them.
Well. The only thing is, in the current era, they're so powerful, they don't really have anything to worry about, and even the Sorcerer Kings, the most powerful beings on the planet as it is, they don't just go about defiling willy-nilly.
No.
So nobody's going to call them on it, but they don't just randomly do it
anymore.
Because they actually are the ones that made things the way they are. But, basically, they look at the world as their prize, and they still are kind of protective of it, even though they're kind of terrible people. They want to control the world. I think
part of it is that, and then also it's like, we're the only ones allowed to break stuff now.
Right. Well,
kind of mentality.
Yeah. And and still they do it very rarely. Like if you look at the novels or whatever, there's very few instances of even a sorcerer king, or maybe even any instances of them doing any defiling, because they did it centuries ago.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't really. They've already ascended to their path.
So Dark Sun sounds kind of boring. You can't be a mage. If you do, you defile. Then everybody wants to kill you. Why would you want to play in Dark Sun?
To fill the void in that magic user spot is the psionic. Everything has some kind of psionics going for it. A lot of the creatures in the Monsters Manual for Athas have psionic powers. Like you said, the plants, many of them have some kind of intellect or a base animalistic psionic power, and it usually helps them kill you. So it's overall it's kind of.
How'd you die? From that lich covering rock?
Yeah. It's kind of like it brings in an element of like Frank Herbert's Dune or something like that. Just sort of like a creepy sort of like mind power. Whether it's just somebody's will beating you down or.
And it has that. The thing about psionics done in Dark Sun is that it's incorporated rather than. Oh, I'm just adding psionics to the campaign, which a lot of DMs don't even allow because it's just aggravating to deal with that whole set. Well, how does it interact with magic? How does it do this? How does it do that? You just get around a lot of the... In second edition, psionics could get around a lot of the level restrictions that the mages had to deal with through their uses of powers that were kind of like could be off balance. But when most of the things are psionic or have some psionic powers, psionics become more of like the background of the world, so it's more legitimate to have psionicists in the group.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, part of that is like it explains this sort of alternate evolution, that things took, and everything's way more hostile. And one of the manifestations of that is like things have these weird inborn talents. Like everything in Dark Sun is like mutated. Like none of your player races are anything like the ones that you would find in this standard setting, like your Forgotten Realms.
They changed them all.
Yeah, they're super warped. Like elves are like super tall, thin, like crazy endurance runners. Dwarves are like even more chiseled and solid looking and completely hairless.
What did they do to one of my favorite races, the gnome?
Oh, they made them extinct. They wiped them
out. What about the halfling?
Oh, well, great that you should ask. They are cannibal savages that one of the few jungles they roam that, and they eat people.
They sound cuddly.
Other intelligent races, no problem with cooking.
They sound hobbitish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a humanoid in your belly does mean comfort in halfling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But will they eat a goblin?
Goblins also wiped out.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
What's left?
Yeah, well, let's see. So you have the Aaracroka, which are these sort of vulture men that can fly. They're pretty sweet. Well, except for the claustrophobia. That's no good. You have the half giant, which has had some iterations in the various editions of D&D. So your halfling, dwarf, elf, your half-breed versions of that. Let's see, am I leaving anybody out?
The mole.
The mole. The mole is pretty sweet, too. So the mole is the basically an engineered race of super endurant either laborers or gladiators bred from stock of dwarves or...
Dwarves and humans.
Dwarves and humans, exactly. And, also pretty awesome.
Oh,
so
and forgetting the Thri-kreen.
Oh, yeah, and the Thri-kreen.
Psionic insects.
Yeah, so they're like these mantis warriors. They're really neat. They can like leap really far distances, and they live off of very minimal water, which in a desert planet is super handy. So super survival, and anything you read of the old Dark Sun, which I have some of this arrayed here. Like when you read any of the old books on them on the Thri-kreen, it's just like they link everything back to like hunting, the experience of hunting and being in the pack
and their clutch.
Right. Yeah. So. Even buying something is like a hunting excursion. Like, like you announce who you are and like, I wish to acquire this. I have this much coin, and then like they try to haggle, but like you want to almost feel like it's counter move because you're on the hunt to acquire something.
Just like with the regular second edition style, you had the complete book of elves and the complete book of dwarves. Dark Sun actually has, as we have over there, the complete book of Thri-kreens. I think it's actually called Thri-kreen of Athas, but it's pretty much the complete book of it. It's a very similar build to that, and it really goes into depth as what I like to think of as the master race of Athas.
So with a game in Dark Sun Athas, I mean we're playing one with you right now, and you definitely have a whole lot more of issues when it comes to resource management. Because you are in the desert, so this has some direct effects on your characters. One, you need more water and more often. You can't wear heavy armors.
Yeah. You're concerned about access to rations because finding food is sometimes troublesome. You
just can't shoot rabbits in the woods because both those things are missing.
Yeah, because there's no woods and if there are rabbits, they can probably kill you with their mind.
Yeah, I mean. It does bring some difficulties in running a game like that because like the bookkeeping part of the game isn't always the most fun, but like
it's not always glamorous.
Yeah, when you have like a game that's very much about resource management and like really count your ammo or whatever or your water because you could get in a situation where that matters. It's really going to matter. That's a part of the game. Like you have to. It's the feeling of the world. If you're not tracking that kind of thing, then when you put your players in the position where they might not have any water, then you have to deal with that set of circumstances.
And there's a couple other things too. Going back to resources.
Yeah.
Is in Athas there's certain things that you just don't have access to, like metal.
Oh yeah.
Metal is super rare, and you're actually, I think you're actually more likely to find gold than you are steel.
Right.
Precious metals are actually less precious than steel.
Right.
Because the steel is in less abundance, and it's actually more useful. You can make tools and weapons from it. Where the precious metals, they look good and all, but that's about it. They're not useful, and so the whole economy in Athas is way different. Matter of fact, you don't actually use coins. You use what we use is ceramic pieces.
Right. It's kind of like a representative system against gold that the sorcerer kings have in their cities. So they mint their own coins. Yeah, the bad guys own everything
out of clay,
and they mint their own coins that are made out of clay, and they're like these ceramic, like circular tiles. They can actually break up into smaller pieces that are bits. So pieces. So the original Bitcoins, right? Anyway, so that's kind of cool. It was a neat little thing. The idea of this, this piece of money that you can break up into little ceramic pieces.
And going back to the D&D mechanics, you have gold pieces, which 10 silver pieces is a gold piece. Well, in Dark Sun, that's how it works. 10 bits is a ceramic piece.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they just took it a step further to go, oh, not only is these 10 bits a ceramic piece, they actually came from a fully formed ceramic piece.
Yeah. So I mean, just there's lots of little flavor things. There are these little beacons of civilization, like the city states. There's I think 7 of them. Most of them are run by sorcerer kings, and so within the confines of the city state, you have these bureaucrat priests. Basically, they're called Templars. So the servants of the sorcerer kings, they run the day-to-day affairs. Things from down from sanitation.
They're your civil servants.
Civil servants, but down from sanitation all the way up to high military command. They're not usually the ones directly doing the fight. They have soldiers that they direct, but they're the administrators to all that stuff. They oversee everything, and most of them are corrupt. 80-90% are corrupt and evil bastards. So the people running everything are evil.
And one of the ways that the sorcerer kings have power over the people is they have that godlike aspect of actually
granting
powers to these Templars, as if the Templars were servants of the deified sorcerer kings.
Another thing that's worth mentioning too is we're talking about Dark Sun, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. There's plenty of dungeons in Athas. But what there isn't plenty of is dragons.
Very few dragons.
And the dragons that are in Athas, they aren't your stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons dragons.
No, not at all.
They the dragons in Dark Sun have evolved from sorcerer kings.
Well,
and there are not many.
I wouldn't necessarily. So there are a few major power dragons that are actually the sorcerer kings. That's a lot of the sorcerer kings were working on becoming dragon kings, and some of them succeeded. Some of them stopped the process, and then some of them, die throughout the progression of the campaign world. But so you have those, but then also, and so they're not really true dragons. They're being
it's
altered
extending
beings.
Their life. It's creating them. They're getting to be immortal.
Well, that's the only kind of dragons there are in Athas.
Yeah,
right. So. No. They're the altered beings. But then you get into there's lots of drake creatures that are.
Well, yeah.
They're dragonoids, but they're not again they're
the
not
dragon
the
subtype.
So you have these sort of elemental drakes that are around Athas, like a silt drake or a magma drake that sort of hang around. It's almost like how the wyvern it's technically a dragon, but it's a bottom shelf, lower rung dragon.
Right.
It's kind of
if you ever told a true dragon that you and that wyvern, they're pretty much the same. You'd probably rip your face off.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, you have that. And then, you had the thing where you guys encountered that young Sonic dragon, and that thing did not look or behave like most any dragon, except for it collected some treasure. You know, like that's
Yeah, they don't,
it's the
basically your traditional dragons in Dark Sun do not exist.
no.
You know, the closest thing is the evolved Sorcerer King into a dragon, because they actually take on a draconic form, except for, you know, they're not really dragons, because if they were, it'd be like an uber dragon.
Yeah. It would be like a dragon that was also a 30th level wizard and a 30th level psionic ability as well. So
It's like a dragon demigod.
Yeah.
So yeah, going rate of about a CR 60.
Yeah.
Deal with that. Deal with that.
And there's only like 2 of them anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. So so that's a bit about that. What else do we have to say here? So basically there has not been a lot of product support. There was a foray into it in 4th edition. It wasn't really my favorite edition. So
I honestly didn't even look into that very much. I don't even know. I know they did some kind of template-ish thing for for them. I mean, some of you guys, you probably know better than us, because we really just didn't delve into it.
I bought all the 4th edition Dark Sun stuff, and when I got rid of my 4th edition books, I also got rid of that, because I was like, I'm never going to play 4th edition again.
You got rid of all your books?
I got rid of all my 4th edition. It wasn't my edition. Yeah. I donated it to a Goodwill somewhere in New Mexico, so maybe somebody will start, pick up the hobby from there and go forth and play, but it just was not an edition that I enjoyed. So.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of AD&D 2nd edition here.
Yeah, the height of Dark Sun was for AD&D and second, because then they kind of came up with revised rules. The only 3rd edition stuff there's Athas.org, which is a fan-based website that's still online, and then there was a handful of supplements that were in the Dungeons and Dragons magazines back in the early 2000s, I guess. So yeah, basically those books and stuff on Athas.org, because I'm running a Pathfinder game that shoehorns some Dark Sun rules and mechanics into it. It's the only way. So you have to house rule a crap ton of stuff to make it work. But it's such a cool campaign setting that it makes me want to do it. Because
now, it's worth the extra effort and work.
Yeah. And I gotta say, the way that we all got into Dark Sun was through the novelization.
Yeah.
TSR at the time, they were writing a lot of really good books, and Dark Sun was some of their best. They had some good writing on there, and I believe we've all read all of the books from that era.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
All the novels. There was about 13 or something, not too many, but they're all really good, and they told stories that we weren't used to reading. It was definitely a different take on your sci-fi fantasy books for us, especially at the time. I hadn't read anything kind of like that, and it's almost like you're almost delving into the sci-fi area, even more so than the fantasy, which is different for me, because I've always read fantasy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just gets so far away from the Tolkien.
From the norm of high fantasy. Yeah.
Well, and then too, when you look at the art from Dark Sun, a lot of which was done by Brom.
Yep. Freaking love Brom. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Definitely colors that have been different.
Yeah. Let's see. I think some of this stuff too is even used as some of the book covers for I'm pretty sure this was a book cover, or at least the back part of a jacket. Share some other stuff while we. But
the Brom S&M fantasy.
Yeah, it's some of the stuff it takes on a bit of almost like a fetish sort of look to it. Yeah, absolutely this one. Very leather clad and so she's pretty dominatrixy looking. So.
You got stuff like this is very. Actually reminds me of some Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, it's definitely some of that going on. So I mean, it's very brought to somewhere between pulp and Conan and again the sort of just gritty survivalistic stuff. You know, like just things like lash together, scavenge. You know.
So for us, it introduced us to a lot of elements we weren't used to. As from the aspect of story, as well as mechanics, and just playing a different type of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. So I was actually I read a little bit into the history of how Dark Sun came to be, because a lot of the way campaign settings were sort of scripted was the idea was to sell ideas and products that TSR at the time had been working on. So the original thing was to market a mass combat system. Like originally Dark Sun, the working title for it was War World. And it was like the idea, because the first major story arc of Dark Sun, as far as like if you were to follow the modules from start to finish, was the Tyr and Yorick going to war with one another. So
which happens in the book.
It happens in the book series, yeah. I mean, it happens well in the book series, but there was like, so in those box sets, it was like, ways of making these two armies fight each other and figuring out outcomes for that stuff. Wasn't so much fun to play out because, like as tabletop role players, we were more into like whatever.
It becomes a war game instead of a role-playing game.
Well, isn't that like reversing
the
how
way
D&D
the genesis
came about?
of the game?
Yeah,
and it's just like, well, I mean, if I wanted to play an army system game, some people are into that and do both, but some people just want to focus on what their characters are doing. So like, yeah, so that was what was happening. It wasn't hugely popular. Another thing that was going on was psionics, and actually I was reading this thing where like a lot of the writers were kind of miffed at the idea of shoving the psionics mechanics into all the monsters because it was this like other complicated thing that they had to deal with. I mean, because there's various levels of complications in AD&D and second ed with psionics. And, the way that all worked. So I mean, it's just another layer to the game. But it's interesting to see like. At one point, the idea was it was a product and it evolved into something cool. And actually, the way Dark Sun came about, like looking the way it does and feeling the way it does in writing, is that they basically Brahms' visual development, because he was an in-house artist for TSR, he was given pretty much free reign to generate images, and it started happening that they would spitball, like they would take the cool stuff he was doing and they would start scripting that back into the writing of the world and the way it sort of started to all evolve.
What does this mean? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I mean, so like they started like seeing the and Brahms like a big fan of like like the writing of Michael Moorcock, and you could see like that sort of like sort of gritty and desperate sort of things going on in this. So like the art informed the writing. And then just vice versa, and then you get what ultimately came to be. Like, and that was one of the first times that kind of thing happened with TSR back in the day.
So, Dark Sun. We're playing it right now.
We are playing it right now.
Pathfinder. You can't. I guess 4th edition, was the last time they released anything for it.
Official, yeah. Well, I mean, other than these little like supplementals that were back when Paizo was publishing Dungeons and Dragons magazine arm, and before they were publishing their own rival game.
Yeah.
I feel to put it into 5th edition terms, it's difficult because there's so many negatives and penalties.
There's
in
lots
Dark
of
Sun
like
for things.
micro penalties.
Yeah,
because
like -1, -2 for this, all this kind of, especially for all the weapons. Well, I mean, how would combating that for 5th to turning it and like kind of turning it into a 5th edition game, they would have a lot of backlog work for themselves to do.
Lots to rein in.
Yeah, lots to rein in.
Or it's like, all right, do you go back to adding all the minuses and pluses that you dealt with from the earlier editions?
I think it would just be more simplistic to say, metal weapons have these pluses, or bone weapons have a +1 comparatively speaking, and metal weapons have a +2 just to start as they are. And stone weapons just stink, and then the monsters are ridiculous like they are in Athas, and you just got to deal with it.
Well, one of the things we were talking about, I don't know if it was you and I, or maybe it was when Ted was down here earlier, just talking about like maybe you make the stone and bone weapons do like a lower die of damage.
Oh yeah, that's what I suggested that.
Or
I forgot.
Yeah, it was a good idea. Or actually, the other day I was thinking about this. maybe the stone and bone weapons that aren't as good as steel and iron, maybe they take away the proficiency bonus because they're not that high a quality. So like you lose out on that extra edge that you would have if it was a real, legitimate version of that weapon. Or maybe you take the advantage disadvantage into rolling damage, where you have to take disadvantage on the damage die, something like that. I don't know. Like it would be quite a bit.
Take the lowest.
Yeah, take the lowest, because that's another way.
Yeah.
Of possibly looking at it, fielding it. Yeah, it's tough, but Dark Sun is tough.
Dark Sun is brutal.
Well,
Ruthless and
well,
unforgiving.
it sounds like they're quoting all the different stuff in 5th edition. So, they're talking about Dragonlance. They're talking about Forgotten Realms. I think they've mentioned Greyhawk.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, heck, in all this, in the spells, Greyhawk's like prevalent there.
Hey, dude, I even saw there was a write up on and no, isn't even the Thri-kreen is in the monster manual, right?
Yeah, Thri-kreen.
Yeah, Thri-kreen. So at least they have, that's a little snippet, a little preview of something. The Thri-kreen. If any of you have the 5e monster manual, the Thri-kreen, one of the monsters we talked about, it's a different version because they had to make it work for this edition of the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. But it's it's there, and you can kind of get a feel of maybe ways that it might go. For the broader campaign world.
It sounds like there's going to be a lot of support across 5th edition for the different campaigns.
Yeah.
So maybe we will see a Dark Sun 5e, and I'm curious to see how they hammer out, using the inferior weapons and all that stuff.
Yeah, and reining psionics back into the rule set.
Well, it's in the monster manual. They talk about psionics.
Yeah.
Do they just list things as spells and go psionics descriptor? Absolutely. But they're talking psionics, so it's it's going to be part of the game at some point or another.
Right. I mean, relatively, because your game can be as psionic or non-psionic as you like.
Well, with this edition, it's real easy to, I think, to bring it in or bring it out.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that has very little to do with Dark Sun. So, for the most part, what we wanted to do really is just talk about Dark Sun. It's a campaign world we've enjoyed for a long time. We love the novelizations of reading them. And here we are, 2014. We're still playing Dark Sun.
Right. A setting that came out in 89, 91, something like that.
The first campaign I played when I was 14.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is this the original box set?
That's not.
Or is it
that's the expanded and revised.
Is there a date on this thing? 1995.
Yeah, for the expanded and revised, exactly. So.
1995. Wow.
Yeah, actually, it's funny when you flip through these books too. All of them are in black and white, or it might be just one color printing, as far as so you have maybe a tan color and then everything else is grayscale. So you can see this is back before TSR now was just the coast, but it was back before they had any sort of major budgets or funding or whatever. The printing technology too has come really far, so it's probably a lot cheaper to do the full color stuff. But it's just interesting to go through these black and white books that now would probably be printed in full color.
I'm still just trying to wrap my mind around the fact that Dark Sun came out about 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. Pretty crazy.
And probably longer than that, really, because that's just because the novelization happened, but well before the product releases.
Is it? You think? I would think that was almost concurrent, that they were probably scripting stuff and then.
I don't think so. I think they released the novelizations, and then after that moved into the. I could be wrong.
I wouldn't know. I started reading the books after I started playing the game, so.
Yeah. It's usually a vice versa sort of proposition.
Yeah. But I know in our circles, the Dark Sun books kind of went like wildfire. Because
I burned through those books quick.
Yeah, they had really interesting they weren't one dimension vanilla heroes. Most of the heroic characters had problems and issues. They were not.
It was grittier.
Yeah,
it was definitely definitely anti-heroes and flawed characters.
Yeah. Yeah, like you didn't have your Dudley do right. It's just like this guy
they-
mostly does the right thing.
There were
but
people doing the best they could in a
under
really crummy
really-
situation.
yeah.
Well, Rikus is a great example. The gladiator who ends up leading an army, who's an awesome fighter, and so he thinks because he's an awesome fighter that he's making an awesome general, but he sucked.
Yeah.
And then he had to come to grips with, oh, I'm not a good leader.
Yeah. Among other things, you had Sidira, who was a preserver wizard who defiled on a couple of occasions. She felt conflicted about it. Oh dear.
The power.
The power.
Yeah. So, but yeah, all in all, just wanted to present a bit of an overview on this really awesome campaign world. That you guys can go check out. Like, it shows up on Wikipedia. Like I said, there's Athas.org is another cool resource, and hopefully we'll be seeing some more stuff coming out through 5e 5th edition stuff in probably a year or two. But.
Not only that, guys, if you want us to talk about another campaign setting, we've done Dragonlance, we've done Hebron. We know.
Well, we've never talked about them at length. But if you want us to vamp on a little bit,
Ravenloft,
put some comments below and we can talk about it.
Yeah, let us know. So until next time, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter,
Nerdarchy.com. Social media in general. If you look us up, you'll surely find us. Yeah, that's right.
So until next time, my
said,
friends,
stay nerdy.